Hello everyone, it's Benny, and welcome back to the 3D game programming tutorial series. Last time, we created an input control that's independent of our input system, so our game can function without even caring how it's being controlled or what we're controlling it with. Our input system is completely isolated from the rest of the game, which is awesome. And we also created the first part of our event handler for the game and this new input system. And we talked about a little bit of an interesting data structure to implement it. But we left off at just populating the data structure. Now we can add things to the data structure. How do we use it? How can we turn that data structure and make it handle events properly and actually control the game? That'll be the topic of this video. By the end of this video, we will have something on screen controlled with our new system. Let's get to it. Now, on mouse move, I'm just going to leave as an empty method because we have nothing to do. And mouse up, down, and key up and down, all of these are going to do very similar things. In fact, they're going to do exactly the same thing, just with slightly different parameterization. So in order to not duplicate code, I'm going to create a private method, update input. It's going to take an unsigned int32, I'm going to call input code, which is basically going to be this or this, depending on if it's key or mouse. And what else do I need? I also need to know whether or not the button is being pressed or released. So I'm going to have a float for direction. And last but most certainly not least, I need to know whether or not this is being a repeated input or not. I don't need to know about number of clicks because for now we're not doing any special handling for double clicks. It'll just count as click, release, So yeah. So now that we have this method, now we should be able to implement inputs in, well, with a whole lot less code repetition. So first of all, if it is a repeat, we're just going to return. We don't care to handle the simulated repeat keys. We only care about real physical key presses. If the W key is pressed, I don't care if it's long enough for it to simulate a repeat, like, say, this. I don't care about that. I just care, is the W key been pressed? Has it been physically released? So, ignoring repeats. Other than that, it should be really straightforward. What I need to do is I need the array of input controls and weights assigned to this particular input code. So for uint32i equals 0, I is less than input sub input code. I believe .size is the parameter. And there. So we're going to go through every single one of these pairs of weights and inputs, map to this key code, and we're going to update it. So we're going to say input sub-input codes, and we're going to look at the current pair, so sub-I. So we're currently looking at a single pair of floats and inputs. What do we want to do? Well, we want the second, that's the input control reference, and what we want to do is use this method, add amount, to, well, add to it. Whether we're adding positive or negative depends on the direction. So what we're going to do is we're going to add this pair's weight, which is the first. That will give us the float, which is the weight. And we're going to multiply it by the direction. So basically the direction is going to be either 1 or -1. If it's 1, the key is down, so we'll be adding the weight. If it's -1, we'll be subtracting the weight. Pretty straightforward. And really, this is all we need. All we need now is to actually use it. So on key down is just going to call update input with key code. And +1 because it's going down, and is repeat. There you go. This is all we need. That's the entirety of on key down implemented. On key up. Same thing, except -1 because the key is being released. On mouse down, same sort of thing, except we need to add the mouse offset, which again we're going to update in just a moment, it needs to be positive because keys down, and this can't have repeat, so that's just going to be false. And final thing on mouse up, same thing, except it's going to be negative. And there you go, we have implemented our game event handler. It's done. We are handling inputs, and we're properly updating all the input controls based on the inputs. Alright, so now we should be able to go to main.cpp and add some real controls to move our monkey head. So first of all, I'm going to delete our temp event handler, and I'm going to include the big boy, the game event handler.hpp. So now what? If I scroll down, I can replace temp event handler with game event handler. And I can go ahead and delete this temporary key down nonsense because we're going to have real controls now. None of that silly nonsense. And what we're going to do is, first of all, we're going to create some input controls. So I'm going to have one for horizontal and one for vertical. So yeah, this is going to be the horizontal movement of the monkey head. This is going to be the vertical movement. And we're going to use the methods we created. If you remember from GameEventHandler.hpp, we have this add key control method, and we can add some key code, which I'll add in just a moment, to our horizontal input control, and we don't need to worry about weight. Well, sure, actually we do need to worry about weight. I'll set it to 1 for now, but our real issue isn't the weight moment, it's how do we get these magical key codes? Well, something you might have noticed is there's this input folder which just has input.h. What is input.h? Well, it's the header file for the input interface in the 3D Game Engine CPP, the C++ version of the 3D Game Engine from that series. And you might wonder, why do we have this? Obviously we're not using it because we just wrote our own input system. And obviously we don't implement any of the methods or use this anywhere, so why does this exist? Well, really because in here I have all of the keys mapped to their corresponding scan codes. So rather than tediously rewrite all these out by hand, I'm just going to take advantage of this to have enums that nicely map meaningful things like the A key is scan code 4, and so forth and so on. So I'm going to rename this to input, and I'm going to delete all of the functions and constants. Well, yeah, we can keep our num keys constant, why not? Because that's actually going to be useful. I'm going to rename this to just input.h, and I'm going to move that to core because we don't need this silly input folder anymore. It's not doing anything. So if I go to, actually, before I do that, GameEventHandler.cpp, I can include core/input.hpp. Actually, I should rename it to hpp because that's my convention for this project. And I can set mouse offset to input:"num key codes," which I believe is what I called it. I'm going to double check just to be sure. If I scroll down, num keys. See, good thing I checked. So yeah, this way, they'll never overlap. It'll always be the mouse offset, the mouse button, which actually I've named it key code, not mouse button. That's actually an issue. Did I make that mistake over here too? I did. And also it appears input control has one too many of these brackets. Less dense than signs, whatever you call these things. Angle brackets, there you go. Couldn't think of the name for a moment, but yeah. So those would have been a few compiler errors, but there we go, we fixed them. And with that out of the way, now we can include our actual input.hpp from core/input.hpp, excuse me. And we can map this to some actual keys, wherever it is. There it is. So let's say D is going to be positive. Sure, I'll say A is negative horizontal motion, and D is positive horizontal motion. So we can have WASD controls, or we can have the same sort of controls for left and right. So there you go, these are horizontal controls. And I can go ahead and add key controls for vertical as well. I don't know why I keep selecting the whole line, that's weird. But anyways, W is, well, I have them backwards, but whatever. Positive, negative, sure. And up and down. So there we go. We've mapped a whole bunch of keys to our horizontal and vertical input controllers. If our game input handler is doing its job correctly, horizontal should always be 1 if one of the move forward or move right keys is there. And it should always be -1 if move left is there. And if both of them are down, well, that's why we were doing adding. We should add +1 and -1, so it should sum to 0. But yeah, that's enough rambling. Let's make some small changes. Right now we're setting the monkey heads to random X and Y positions. I'm just going to change that to 0.0F and 0.0F. And I'm going to reduce it to just a single monkey head. We don't need 100 monkey heads. Yeah, that should be good. So last, but certainly not least, we can set... I believe I have X position, Y position defined somewhere, do I? Apparently not, so okay. So now I need to define the variable for the X and Y position. So I'm going to have float XPOS equals 0.0F and float YPOS equals 0.0F. In fact, I should probably define these above where I'm specifying the monkey head. And yeah, set the monkey head's position to the initial... Well, actually, no, I don't want to do that. Never mind. So yeah, this is going to be XPOS and YPOS. XPOS, I'm going to add, now if you remember from when we defined it, in our input control we have this getAmount method. So we're going to add horizontal.getAmount. And there's a few things. We don't just want to add 1 every time. We want to count for the frame time, so however long it's taken to draw the frame, we're going to multiply by that, so this way we should be moving the same amount per second on average. And let's just multiply it by 10, because that's probably still not going to be enough. And YPOS, same sort of thing, except with vertical. So sweet. We should have our X and Y position. We should now be able to say transform. And there's a translation method, which takes in a vector 3f, where we can specify our XPOS and YPOS, and we don't care about Z, so I'm just going to put it to 0. Yeah, that should be it. I think that should be it. So let's go ahead and make and run. And of course we're going to have errors, because there's always going to be errors. It's never quite that simple. So, for getAmount, I forgot to specify it as a float, because I'm silly like that. So that's a small correction. And somehow, that's it. I'm now moving the monkey head with the arrow key. So I press both keys left and right at the same time. It doesn't move, but I can still move up, down, at least. I can move with W, A, S, and D, and left, right. There you go. Everything is working. I can fly the monkey head wherever I want. We have input, folks. We can control this, and the monkey head doesn't even have to care how we're controlling it. It just knows, hey, this is how much I'm supposed to move. There we go. We can build a game, and we can build the entire game independent of what the controls are. That is awesome, and that will be all for this video, because it brings up our next major question. Sure, now we can control one monkey head, but player control is just a single part of a game. We need to interact. How can we make this monkey head interact with things and have the game respond and perhaps do its own entirely independent thing that has nothing to do with our controls in response to what our monkey head does? Find out next time. I hope you enjoyed, I hope you learned, and I will see you in the next video.